Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Hi. So I emailed Anthony, he's like, what song do you want to be played into? He's like, Stronger by Kanye West. I said, okay. He's like, oh, you're serious? Really? You guys are doing that? So
I thought I left the entertainment business and I was back in Silicon Valley. But
well, we're stoked to have Anthony tonight. Just to give you, for those of you who aren't familiar with Anthony, to give you a bit of background on him, Anthony worked at Apple in the 90s out of school. He then went to business school at Harvard, and he came back, worked in a number of startups, had a number of different roles. Finally, ended up at Yahoo in a kind of senior executive role there. Left Yahoo, started his own company called Dotspotter, which we'll let him tell us a little bit about. And Dotspotter was acquired by CBS 1 year and 1 day after it was founded. Wouldn't that be nice? And then Anthony subsequently ran CBS's interactive business for a number of years, and he recently left to found another company, start another company, Booyah Labs. What is Booyah Labs, Anthony?
it's still in stealth mode, but what I can say is it's in the consumer internet space I would say, the intersection of mobile and healthcare.
Okay. So hopefully no one's working in that space. We just pivoted.
Pretty broad.
So we're going to talk about a number of different things. We're going to talk about a little bit about some kind of career things, your kind of untraditional path. I would say in some regards, some ways it's not, but and then startups, and then kind of move into kind of advertising and some of those different models. But talk about. I mean, were you always an entrepreneur? You started at Apple. Did you leave school thinking I'm going to go start a business, or was it I'm going to go learn? How did that process work for you?
Well, I guess I grew up in a family that I would say my parents might have been lower middle class, would probably be the best classification for it. So as a kid, I was always looking for actually businesses to start to make money. That kind of behavior continued when I got to college. I actually started a computer repair business actually in college, which actually subsequently paid for all my expenses in college. When I left college, I actually had a few routes to take when I left in the early 90s. And one of my passions growing up in the Bay Area was actually Apple, because when I was 13, I played with an Apple. I always loved their products. So they weren't hiring the year I was looking. And so what I did is I actually ended up cold calling them, I think, every day for every business day for 6 months. And I got an interview, got a job there, and that's kind of how I ended up there. I always had the intention, though, of starting my own company. It was just that even at a younger age, I thought that I could benefit greatly from seeing how companies are run in larger enterprises. I think that at least made sense to me, because if you think about building something, you always want to know what the end result looks like in a lot of respects. And, if your company will be successful, hopefully it will be, you're either going to get acquired by a larger company where your company has to fit in, or your company's going to grow and become large. And so, but from that standpoint, I thought it would be great to actually understand what the end product's supposed to look like. So I spent a number of years at Apple. I then took off to business school. And there, I think, I picked up more of the process. It didn't really teach me anything per se that I can read in a book, but I think it allowed me to learn quicker in terms of business models, kind of thinking and making decisions. And then I came out, graduated, and 6 months later, started my first company. So
yeah. So, and I noticed some of them are, conspicuously missing from LinkedIn profiles. We had Naval here last month, and we started naming some of the companies. He's like, whoa, I don't take credit for some of those. But talk about, you've told me some of these stories. Talk about some of your kind of early failings, some kind of stories from some of these early startups before you were sitting in the startup grind, hot seat. This great accomplishment, this great honor that.
Yeah, so I would say, well, first, when I started my first company, I didn't really understand what I was doing. It was, you know, I had an idea because I was working at a company called Inktomy. Have you guys ever heard of Inktomy at one time? At one time, they were actually the premier, I would say, #1 dominant internet infrastructure company. They were in 3 different multi-billion-dollar businesses: web search, data caching, CDN, content caching, and then third was comparison shopping. They were #1 in every one of those and gave them all up. But at the time, when they were in the #1 position, I actually had an interesting perspective in terms of being able to see what was working, what wasn't on the web. And their CDN business that they controlled, I noticed that about 25% of 25% of all traffic on the web, at least that was going through AOL and some of their other partners going through their caching product, actually were displaying video. These were corporate intranets. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great back in 1999 to think that you know, you could start a user-generated video company. Well, I think the big lesson I learned there is it's much better when you start a company to be probably about 5 feet ahead of the next guy instead of being about 8 miles ahead, because when you're 8 miles ahead, and never tell an investor you're 8 miles ahead, because basically all you're telling them is you're going to be subsidized. They're going to be helping you subsidize education for an industry. So we were way early. I mean, the first thing we put up was my LASIK eye surgery, thinking, I wonder how this would hit. We put it up and had 3 million views in 2 weeks, and we thought, wow, there's something here. So we on
Maybe
that
it was your eyes. You have beautiful eyes.
Yeah, on that idea, we decided to go raise money. Took us about a week to raise $3 million back in '99, and we raised $3 million on basically like 5 PowerPoint slides, and Dotspotter. We didn't have PowerPoint slides at all. We raised our money. So what happened was we launched this thing, and one of the things we realized back in 1999, this is before Windows Movie Maker, before there was an ability to really upload your video, that we realized it was going to be actually very difficult to get content. And so one of the things we stumbled upon was the fact that there were all these film festivals, and filmmakers actually needed a way to exhibit their work, because what they want to do is they want to be found at these film festivals. So we decided to go into the business of trying to be a farm team for Hollywood. And you know, being young and naive, being an entrepreneur with no other options, I decided to start cold calling every Hollywood studio, telling them my bright idea about that we could disintermediate the industry, make it a lot more efficient. We could basically allow them to see hits, film, you know, that were going to be hits before they launched. It was a great idea to me. And so I sat down and actually had a meeting with Tom McGrath, who was a #2 guy at Paramount at the time. I got in through a business school connection. And so I walk in and tell him about how efficient my market was going, our product was going to be, and how we would actually help them find their next generation of stars. About 2 minutes into my conversation, when I said efficient and when I said easier, he stopped me in my conversation, almost swore me up and down, and said, you know, I'm at Paramount. I don't make anything. I don't manufacture a thing. I don't really actually finance anything. I get paid for getting in the way. So why the heck would I want your product? I love talking to guys like you so I can kick you out of the office, was basically what he said. And so,
Did he?
No, actually, not until I asked for if he would if he gave me validation with my parking. But I think it was at that point that I realized that business was not going to work. But we actually ended up selling shows. It's funny because, as you know, when you start a company, you never know where you're going to end up. You kind of have an idea. You try to attack a big market, and then along the way, whoever tells you they have it all figured out is probably lying. But you continually kind of learn the industry, and you adjust in your behavior accordingly. We realized, actually, one of the things we realized was that we actually had really terrible films on our service. But people are watching these things, and we thought if you liked one crappy film, maybe we can suggest another crappy film for you to watch. And so we built this recommendation engine, and that was a piece I think that was interesting to movietickets.com. They were owned by Hollywood Media, and they were doing all the ticketing for AMC Theater at the time. I think they still do. And so they really liked our recommendation engine and thought that that could apply to their company. So that was a wild story. I think the other wild story that came out of that for a startup experience is what I would say is 9 months into it, we had a buyout offer from a company up in Redmond for a lot of money. And it was going to be quite a return for our investors. This was like still 2000, or middle 2000, so they had just bought a music site and they thought they wanted to get in the video space. So we were jumping for joy thinking this was going to be awesome. And the first offer, our board was like, just get the deal closed, this is great. There was a kind of a delay in the negotiation process, and the thing went from tens of millions of dollars to, why don't you join us, we'll give you a nice signing bonus. Because that was quickly and how violently the market had crashed on us. And also, I think if we look back, there were a lot of things that we could have done differently and better. One of them was to figure out the business model a lot earlier than we did. But those were learning experiences, and at the end, we ended up with a great outcome for the company. Yeah,
and you talked about at the beginning about entrepreneurs acquiring the skills that you want to build a great product, but you're also trying to build this team, build an entity that is acquirable or is desirable to these big companies. What can you describe some of those traits or some of those things that make a young company interesting to a big company?
Yeah, so I've been on both sides. Obviously, I've been on the side of the startup where I sold 2 companies to larger companies, and then I've been on a larger company side, either at Yahoo or Inc2Me, or last when I was at CBS, where we were looking for companies to buy. And what I would say is that there's not really a cookie-cut formula for what companies are looking for. As an example, I think what you'll find is that in the Valley here, when you're trying to sell to Valley companies, a lot of people talk about platforms, and a lot of people talk about these great technologies. When you sell to media companies, which a lot more startups are selling to, actually platforms and technology matter a lot less. In fact, they don't get the premiums that you might think they will. Big, large media companies actually acquire based upon talent, the talent of the staff that you have, because they're used to it from dealing with stars. And then the second thing they purchase or they are hot on are audiences. And so that's a different perspective than...
Not the size of the audience, but actually...
No, it's the size of the audience of the hopefully it's a consumer services company or a consumer company. If it's a consumer company, they're looking at large audiences because then they can plug into their existing businesses. When I was at Inc2Me, I think we purchased based upon quote-unquote talent as well, but there was a huge emphasis there at Inc2Me on the technology that we were buying. And so it really depends, and when you are talking to a lot of these companies, you really have to kind of adjust and understand where their head's at.
Yeah.
Because if you say the wrong things, obviously, they'll make up their mind within the first, I would say, 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. Do you think, with your history in video and in the consumer space, where is video going? Do you feel like, is there still opportunity? Is there,
Yeah, I think, so the funny thing is, after I sold the first company, Always I left the space back in early 2001 because the promise of video had not hit yet. And actually, the funny story is that I had a friend who was going to join YouTube in 2005, and I told him not to do it because there was going to be no money in video, I thought. He joined 5 weeks later, they got acquired, so the moral of the story is don't listen to me. When actually CBS acquired us and I went back and I ended up running the entertainment division at CBS, which the majority of the business is actually video, I realized there were 2 observations. One is that a lot of the players that I had left in 2001 were still in their existing startups doing the same thing. The second thing I realized was that the audiences that we're talking about now have all gravitated online. we were doing at CBS, the business I was running, about 200, 300, up to 800 million streams a month. And when you look at those type of numbers and kind of where the dollar is going, where the innovations can happen, I think that the video space is actually one of those things that's actually underhyped, not overhyped right now. And I think that there are a ton of opportunities in the video space. I mean, just go on to, if you just go do a search on YouTube or on Google, and when you get back the results, you'll kind of feel like, in some respects, it's like how the web search used to feel back in 98, 99 before Google existed. So I think that there are a lot of white spaces in the video space, and everyone wants to be the navigation guide, and so you have about 30 different companies going after that space. But if you look at the underlying infrastructure, if you look at the underlying economics of the space, there's a lot of pockets where there are opportunities.
When a lot of that content is predominantly funded by advertising, right? So it would, or correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, if you're a young startup, you're trying to get into that space, or you're trying to get into any sort of advertising model space, where do you start? Do you start doing that on day one? Do you wait till you hit a certain point, or
well, it depends if
does
you
it
want
even work?
I think the idea of trying to build a consumer services or a consumer audience company like YouTube, where you're a startup and showing video like that, I think that's been done. It's called YouTube, right? There's two different the video market's kind of splitting up into two. You got on one side, you have professional premium content. Those are the Hulus of the world, the CBS.com, business I ran, ABC.com, TV.com, those type of businesses. And then on the right-hand side, you have a lot of what we call more audience plays, where they'll watch anything, and then advertisers just buying the audience, and so they don't care what they're watching. They're just specifically trying to message and target that audience. I think that there's businesses on both sides, but they probably will not be in terms of a website that says I have more videos than YouTube, because that's not going to happen. But there's going to be interesting niches in terms of how people do curation, for instance, as well as how people think about monetization. And I think that if you look at video consumption, the interesting thing that I find is that I don't know if you guys realize this stat, but over the last 10 years, people are watching more TV and more videos at the same time. The average household average person on a day watches up to 6.5 hours of video a day. That's TV and video. And there's a larger percentage of people kind of shifting online, too. So it's definitely a market that if you look at it, the TV industry is a $120 billion industry. And half of that comes from carriage fees, where people are paying subscriptions. Right now, online, 100% is predominantly advertising. So there's probably a lot of innovations that can happen on the business model side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of innovations that can probably happen on the audience side, or on the advertising side, because all we're doing right now is taking straight 30-second ads and moving it online.
And in terms of, so you told the story about when you originally put that video of your LASIK eye surgery, you got 3 million views. Probably, I'm assuming, from email or posting on.
No, it was.
No,
it was. I stuck it up on my old, I think, Harvard Business School website before they turned me off. I just stuck the video out. I sent it to maybe 5 people saying, "Hey, check out my surgery."
Yeah.
And I didn't even know if it would work.
Is that your video, the one that's on
Yeah, that's
e-bumps?
right. No. But at the time, if you remember, if you played it, actually, Windows Media needed to load. It was a really painful process. And it was actually, equivalent to today, I think it would have been about 300 million views.
And so, I mean, today, it feels like we've had this big wave of like the LinkedIns and the Yelps who really built their infrastructure, built their sites on the back of Google and back of Yahoo and these search engines. Do you see, with the types of video views that you're seeing, are they still coming from search engines? Are they coming from social sharing? Where are these views coming from, and where do you see them coming from?
I mean, I think video by nature, because the search experience is so crappy, you typically don't get a lot of good quality traffic coming from search right now. That's a fact. In fact, I think that there's companies like VideoSurf and others that are trying to fix that problem, but it hasn't been solved yet. So a large majority of recommendations are really coming from, I would say, good quality traffic are coming from the social network sites. And so I think that there were periods of time when I was at CBS where we would see days and weeks where the social networks would eclipse any traffic we ever received from Google.
I mean, the interesting thing about that to me is that it's very difficult for people to own social search, right? Because it's not embedded into Google. It's not baked into their algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy from Eventbrite did a video this last week where he said that the majority of their traffic comes from Facebook, right? So I don't know. Is that thinking right, that you can, if you build something that's compelling enough, that the content is good enough, that you can potentially rise very quickly? And are there streamlined ways of getting to Facebook and getting driven through?
I would say that there's, if you think about since the beginning of the internet here, consumer internet, I think every business has been built on the distribution of a network. May that be email, or now everyone talks about the social networks. So I think that that's going to continue. What I think is more fascinating is that there's going to be certain networks or certain social networks that are much better at displaying certain types of content than others. For instance, I find myself now spending my newsreader Twitter has become my newsreader, and most of my time, I never go to Dig, I never go to the other services now. My reading habits have really changed where I go to Twitter. I use the read later button, and I read it all on Instagram, and I might check out videos there too. I think that it's important for startups to think, as you guys are building your company, what is the exact use case, and try to optimize for those use cases, because it's different probably for everyone. What we knew on the premium content side is doing commercials on television, telling people to come watch videos, didn't really work. It was commercials didn't really have a strong effect in terms of, and it was because no one's going to go run their laptop and watch it when they're watching TV. But I think that what we found is that if you can build groups of people that have the same interests, you can probably ignite that community and get them to watch it when you want to, and gives them some rewards in the process.
So you're starting this new company, right? I've been trying to figure this out. Like, so there are clearly these different paths, right? You have like this path of I sell my company, then I become this angel investor, and I become a VC and do these different things. So it's been reported. Well, the selling price of your company was never reported. I'm assuming it's either in the millions or the billions, right?
It was not there was no B attached, no.
Well, okay. So can we break that?
So I would say it was a nice figure. Considering that we actually never received. So part of the story for Dotspotter is that we actually never received venture funding. In fact, we just raised $1 million. And then what had happened is our first business, the original premise behind Dotspotter, and the reason it was called Dotspotter was when I left Yahoo, we actually made there were two acquisitions at Yahoo that actually fascinated me when I left in 2005. One was a photo company called Flickr. Second one was it was a geo-infrastructure platform called We're on Earth. And if you kind of looked at it, I thought the thing that was interesting was in the real world when I was watching my friends and my wife share photos, she would typically give people these photo albums saying, here's the pictures I took in Palo Alto, and here's the pictures I took in when we were in Hawaii. But on the web at the time, most of the photos that were shared were just based on tags, not very accurate ones. So I thought, wouldn't it make sense if you actually told a story and told a story of your life through maps? And so in each location, and when you clicked on San Francisco, it bubbles up. It's kind of like what Color's trying to do, except a lot more difficult problem because they're trying to figure out proximity too. So we went out with that idea, and to build up a use case that we thought people, because you want to create it where it feels like a game, right? To get the flywheel going. So we decided to build a game based upon celebrity sightings, because when people spot celebrities, they always take their pictures. They always say, this is where I saw it. So we launched the Sundance Film Festival, I think, in early 2007. And we had...
Exploded.
Yeah, it exploded. We had 2 users. One of them was me. So you start this thing and you say, wow, I guess that idea bombed. But what was interesting is our whole team were search guys. They were search engineers, and so they decided when you saw Alex Rodriguez, it would be really cool to show news attached to that person as well. And so that piece actually took off because we became kind of the tech meme for entertainment news. We also, Facebook wasn't open yet, so we built a Facebook basically for entertainment space, saying I was the first to see this new article. And that in turn drove a ton of traffic. And we had this traffic explosion. We sold ads. I think at our peak, 6 months after launch, we had a revenue month doing about $120K in revenue. And our company spend was, about 20, 30K. So the math kind of worked. But about, I think within the 10th or 11th month, we had this offer. And it was kind of an easy choice because we didn't really feel like we wanted to do the entertainment thing. And the fact that we didn't raise a venture round kind of gave us a lot of flexibility of what we wanted to do. So we discussed it as a team and made the decision that we were going to sell. We had two media companies that were actually interested in us, CBS and another media company in New York, and we went with the offer with CBS, and it turned out to be a good thing.
And so you sell your company. You're back. So what is the motivation to do another startup? I mean, financially, you probably don't need to. You could go have some cushy job on Sand Hill Road, I would imagine. I mean, what is it that says to you, this is what I should start all over again now for the 12th time or something?
Well, I would say the grass is always greener is one thing I've realized, because I was trying to, after I left CBS, I was actually planning to take a year off. And what I realized was I actually miss building things. And so taking time off with nothing else to do was actually not a lot of fun, especially when most of your friends are working. And so I went down the path of actually thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And, I looked at a lot of different cases, and I don't think my personality is actually fit to be a venture capitalist, at least not right now. I mean, I've tried I've tried going away from the product side of doing businesses. Like I tried to be a consultant when I was in business school. I tried investment banking when I first graduated from undergrad, and I failed both times. Well, I think my job at Bain, I lasted really a total like a few weeks. So I miss building products. I miss building things, and I miss. I also miss, I think, the office camaraderie. And so all those things have kind of brought me back to kind of thinking about, what to build. And I think that right now when you look at the space, there are just a ton of opportunities, I think, at least in the mobile consumer internet space, where, infrastructure is ready, users are accustomed to doing certain modes of behavior. And it's everything, at least when I looked at space 10 years ago, is happening now, or even more than 12 years ago, back in '99. And so it's an exciting time to do something, and that's kind of what brought me back.
What should an entrepreneur trust his gut?
They should trust their gut if they have a good track record. If the gut has a terrible track record, maybe not. I think that, but what I would say is that as business people, I always tell people I work with, as entrepreneurs, as people that are part of running startups, we actually get paid. Some of us get paid, but really we're in this to make decisions with imperfect information, and so you're never going to get everything analyzed. And I think it's important to make a determination when you want to jump in, and there's going to be decisions where you don't have all the answers, and you will have to rely on your gut, because the reason there are opportunities is because the space has not been defined yet.
So you can't know for sure, but what factors do you use to say, hey, this is a good idea, this is something I should move on, versus it's just another idea?
Well, I would say the filters I use is I think about the opportunity. If it's a huge opportunity, even if it's undefined, but you kind of can feel it and you can see it based upon the data, then you want to jump into it. For instance, the entertainment business, the TV business in particular, it's a $120 billion business just in the U.S. alone. If you jump in and you can figure out where you fit in that ecosystem, somewhere along the line, hopefully you'll be able to find a revenue model that makes sense. If you're jumping into a market where it's very small and your idea is a feature, then I would say maybe you should do more analysis and kind of figure it out. But I think that if you can jump into a market that you feel like is huge and you feel like an idea is big enough in that marketplace, like you can take a big portion of either how people use the service or a big portion of the attention, then I think that you should trust your gut.
What's more important, the idea product or the team?
I would say in the order, it's probably, I hate to say this, but I think it's the culture of the company first and then it's the people inside. And what I mean by that is if you don't get the culture right, you typically, even if you have great talent, it only takes you so far. And when you start a company, I mean, things morph so many times. Even inside a company like CBS, things had evolved quite a bit because our revenue had gone up, hundreds of percentage points up. And in that time, people are good for certain stages, but they might not be as things evolve. I know when it hit a certain stage where we're making a huge amount of revenue that, there's certain people that don't want to be a part of it. But what you want to make sure you get right as you're building these companies, you want to get the culture right because you can acquire the best talent, but if you're not, if there's just ill will, I think it's difficult to build something big or special.
So we have a series of questions we generally ask people to speak with us, and they all start with this preface of if you were a first-time entrepreneur. So if you were a first-time entrepreneur, would you apply for Y Combinator or the other incubators?
Sure. I think it's a great program. It's probably it's kind of like the Harvard Business School for startups. I think it provides a great opportunity, especially for people that don't have a network. It's a great place to start. I guess the question I would have is, as that program scales and there's other programs like it, I would rely less on the fact that there's a platform there, take advantage that it's a learning platform, but at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is still the one responsible for running their company. So I've seen situations where people go in and get advice from a guy or a girl that might have looked at their business for half an hour and gave these advice, and they thought, I need to do everything that person said. I would say kind of go in with open eyes, and it's an entrepreneur's job to kind of go through it and filter out what's good and bad.
Would you launch your company at a conference like Disrupt or Launch?
Probably not.
Why not?
I think that, and I say this, respectfully to both those conferences. I personally think that when you develop your first product, it's probably wrong when you launch. It's hard. Every entrepreneur thinks that as they're going through it, I figured it all out. But I think there's a lot of stuff you haven't figured out yet, and it probably makes sense to get it right before you have a bigger splash. I mean, we've all seen, app companies go out, I think recently, where they go out and they're with the mentality of the agile development process. I'll throw it out and I'll fix it.
Yeah.
But the problem you have nowadays, especially on the mobile side, is you actually have to get it more right, because a lot of times on these charts, your ratings really determine if you're going to get future users. And so I think it's a lot more important to bake your product in front of people that are really your target market. If your target market is the tech crunch disrupt crowd, by all means, probably makes sense. I think most of us aren't launching our business for Silicon Valley. It's for a larger audience. And if that's the case, I would say you probably want to bake it just a bit before you show it to people that potentially will be your power users.
So leading off of that, if your startup, let's say you're working on a startup, you'd launched a product, it wasn't getting any traction despite all your efforts, what would you do next?
I would look, if you're in a big enough market, I would look and see what things are working in the marketplace and see if you could be a fast follower, or if there's something that where your product has a similarity to something else where you can actually pivot or follow. It's okay to be, I think, a fast follower in those situations, and at those times, I think that What you need to do, though, when you launch these things is go after one initiative, not go after 30, because, you're probably not, you don't have a lot of resources to begin with. And I think that the biggest problems for companies, in my mind, is they spread themselves too thin. They don't know which ones are working because they haven't focused on one.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Anthony? Open it up to some Q&A. Yeah. Back. So the question is, what have you seen lately that's really excited you?
Well, I actually saw a company in San Francisco recently called Zimride. I don't know if you guys have seen it. They're building a Airbnb for carpooling. So if you remember back in college, there were these bulletin boards like, I'm looking for a ride to LA from Davis or Berkeley. They're actually moving all that into a way where they're creating really this marketplace of information to connect drivers with riders. I think that is actually a pretty interesting innovation in terms of how they're doing it and the whole experience they kind of wrap around it. Because most cars, if you think about it, have these underutilized seats, especially for college students driving back and forth. And, it can make a huge impact, I think, for the environment as well. So I find that interesting. I looked at and when I came across Clout, how they're kind of building out their social identity and reputation score, I think the stuff that you can do with a company like Clout is fascinating and interesting. Yeah.
And Spencer's got a mic, too.
Or you can just stand in front of the mic right there, actually. Also.
You turn it on.
Do you have any advice for specifically to a game company starting up?
Like a social game company, or like you're going to make Xbox games, or what? Social? Mobile, or just? Mobile. Mobile social.
I would say my advice there is you got to, for all businesses right now, I think the thing people have to figure out, and this is what Reid Hoffman said to me when I was leaving Yahoo, is you got to figure out your distribution strategy. It's just as important as just building a product, because I think most companies, most people when they work inside other companies, they think about building a product all day long. But if you remember, before Apple had built out their Apple stores, they actually had a distribution problem as well. And so if you haven't, I would say spend just as much time as you think through the product on your distribution strategy. And it's probably going to be time well spent. In fact, I might actually spend more time thinking about the distribution strategy than I would building the product for your first phase.
Yeah.
I just wanted to find out if you have maybe a top 5 other entrepreneurs that you've run into over the years that stand out and have made an impact on you, and why.
So I'll just repeat the question. Top 5 entrepreneurs, or a couple of entrepreneurs that you admire or consider to be overly amazing?
Well, I mean, I am actually impressed with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Don't say me. I don't. I mean, was that just let's move somebody else.
I think everyone. I'm impressed actually on every time I come across an entrepreneur. I come away impressed in one way or another, because in a lot of respects, a person who starts a company is really one of the few people that's actually sticking their neck out. And you've seen it. It's so easy in a meeting for people to kind of fold their arms and lean back and not participate. So I think there's the trait of actually trying to do something is a trait that is to be admired. In terms of entrepreneurs that I respect, let's see, there's Jeff Bezos over at Amazon. I think what he's done in terms of scaling the operation, and his clear vision in terms of where he wants to take that company has been absolutely amazing. Steve Jobs, obviously, from his perspective about how he runs and thinks about products all day long. I think that Mark Zuckerberg, obviously, I don't mean to be so cliché with the standard names, but what he's done there and thinking through the idea of the social graph has been amazing. And then, I sometimes visit these incubators in San Francisco, and I think that when I visit some of those incubators I come across, I'm always amazed at the enthusiasm, I think, of most of these entrepreneurs who want to learn something that actually haven't figured out. And for the ones that are actually building products that they want to use themselves, I think those are the ones that really come out in terms of their passion. It's a trait I do admire.
So as a company has successful products, what do you see the top 3 challenges to really scale that small company to a mid-size or larger company?
So I think the biggest challenge as a company becomes successful is determining what are the 1 or 2 things you actually are going to determine as your factor of success. So it's just in nature when you're small, you can be very nimble and you can kind of try various different things, and when you track it, you actually get a lot of noise in the process. I think as you think about scaling up an operation, the key thing is to figure out what will be the key drivers for making your company or your product successful. As an example, I visited a company yesterday who I was actually really interested to invest in, and they've had a pretty good growth spurt up to this point. Now they're trying to figure out what they want to do because they've been successful in terms of in the college market. They've been successful kind of going after the event space, been successful in terms of going after this other space. And I think that if you really want to be successful in one of those and you want to scale, you're going to have to pick a market, and you're going to have to figure out what is one thing that you want to focus on. So for the company, is it revenue? Is it going to be users? I think in their case, they're building a marketplace, so it's based on liquidity. If you can kind of focus on liquidity first, I think revenue, users, everything else kind of is part of that equation. And I think for a lot of companies, as they're going through that growth stage, sometimes they put too many what they call key KPIs or key performance indicators up, and they focus on all the wrong things. In fact, a company can't probably focus on more than 1 or 2. And we've seen that when we've had businesses that I've run in the past through different divisions. If they come back and say they want to focus on 3 or 4 things, they usually fail.
Great. Can we give Anthony a round of applause for